Hello, my fellow learners. This is Juan Jose Gutierrez, and this is SBS200 Introduction to Social Sciences with a little bit of English communication into it. Okay, we're moving right along the semester. This is a whole new chapter for you and for me. We're going to be exploring what is the fuss about the family and kinship and networks and social relations that are based on the family. I think there's a nice connection with this concept of socialization that we explored last week when we explored psychology, personality, and the cultural realm. And we talked about socialization, and we discussed how we are socialized, that is, we're invested in the values of any given society using different institutions and contexts. And the family is perhaps one of the most universal contexts in which every culture and society of the planet socializes its members. So I think it's worth and important that we explore the concept of the family. Shall we? In, um, in the book, you are reading this week a number of elements that define family, and I would say that the book is heavily marked by a sociological tradition more than an anthropological one. So what I have decided for this week is I'm gonna just quickly go over some of the elements that you're going to be reading in the book and that we can then address in class. But then I will be presenting more from an anthropological perspective, so to give you a sense of how different disciplines in the social sciences explore the same topics. And you will probably get to see what's the different emphasis between sociologists and anthropologists. In the book, which is mostly, I would think, a sociological perspective, you will first explore what is the function of the family in society. That is, what is the role that the family plays to maintain and allow the society to continue functioning. And the word function is a metaphor that has been used in social sciences as a metaphor. Think of it. When we talk about function, we we are using an organism as the baseline for comparison. The heart has a function, the liver has a function, your lungs have a function, and without those elements, the whole cannot exist. So it is a metaphor, and we see the family, and functionalist theory prominently has seen the family as one central component that explains the survivability of the entire society. So what is the function of the family? Well, you will see how the first and foremost and most important function of society is the socialization of individuals. There's many more. There's a strong economic component to it, and also the family can be seen as the foundation of any political life in any given society. There are very many different types of families. So that's why the book goes into exploring different family patterns that are out there. We're used to think of our families and our ways of structure the family in the US as being normative. But you will be surprised as to how many different types of families and the strong fundamental reasons why other societies and other cultures see family in a different way. And I think when you look at those cultures from within, you will come to respect other patterns that otherwise might seem strange and let's use the word weird to most people. Say, how can they do that? Well, if you were living in that environment with those traditions, what we do in the States will be radically weird. So weirdness depends on where you're when you're planted in the planet. So one of the things that we might need to continue doing is respecting different perspectives that have to do with how people make a living and survive in different, as I said before, areas of the planet. Um, the job of sociologists and anthropologists is not to make a value judgment of these different traditions and cultures, but to explain them so that we can better understand them. You're entitled to your judgments, but from the social scientific perspective, our job is not so much to cast that judgment, but to understand how these different groups and individuals are organized together and bound by social ties, prominently the family. Some of the questions that you're going to be exploring in the book is, okay, how many mates do you have? Why is it normative to have one partner as opposed to 3, 7? Why do we have to have one male and many female as the norm when you can have the other way around? So we start sort of exploring and breaking those assumptions of what's normative and to see other possibilities. How are mates selected? We used to say because we're in love and that's the way we select our mate. That's wonderful and romantic, but in reality there are many other forces at play when you make that selection, and we seem to be sort of exempt from those rules, but in reality we're not. Social class, income, and cultural context, all of that determine the pattern that you're going to use to make a selection on your mate. That is determining what is an appropriate mate and what is a non-appropriate mate. We explore in the book, going to the third section of the reading, what is the family in the United States today and the different patterns and issues related to family. Very interesting section. And last but not least, we will be exploring also the family in transition. What are the changes that the families are going through in recent times? And in your lifespan, in the last years of my lifespan, there's been important changes in the way the family is organized in the U.S. Let's move right on. For this particular chapter, this is what I need you to pay attention to, because that's what you're going to have to be showing ability to engage with these ideas. First of all, you need to be able to list the variations of family patterns, and not only list them, but be able to explain something about it, right? Where you can find those variations and how to explain for those variations. Then we are also asking you to explore the functions of the family and explain how variations in family patterns serve those functions. Particularly, this chapter explores 3 functions. So pay attention to that as you're doing your reading, because that's something that I will not be covering in this lecture. What is the status of the family in the U.S. today and the problems that the family are facing? And when we say problems, it's not just financial problems, but in terms of its survivability as a unit. And then last but not least, what are the effects of technology on the family? And what is the future like for families in the U.S. today? All right, so that's the reading of the book, and which will run in parallel to what I'm going to be explaining in this lecture today. From the anthropological perspective, family is organized around a specific ritual of passage. Remember that if anything distinguishes human beings is that we're highly symbolic. And one thing that we do quite well is to organize our lives and mark the different stages that we go through, and also determine the different statuses that we achieve or attain as we go from one state to the other. We mentioned in class the other day how your degree represented in a piece of paper was a symbol of a status. You're no longer an undergraduate, you're a graduate now. And that gives you different status and different access, for example, to a vast job market that is out there waiting for you. So the same happens with the family. For you to be able to formally organize a family, it's not the only way, but commonly used system is to engage in a marriage. The marriage can be sanctioned formally or informally, but it's pretty standard that we sanction the marriage formally. So it is an institution in that sense, and it is an institution that transforms the status of participants. Once you're married, you're expected to engage in certain behaviors and responsibilities, right? And it stipulates a degree of your sexual access, for example, to the partners, and that is, you're bound to certain rules of behavior. If you're not married, it's different than if you're married, at least the normal expectation. And then also gives you specific rights as to the offspring that results from that union, right? In the marriage also establishes the family as an institution that perpetuates or gives way to the reproduction and of the social patterns into the next generation, right? It allows you to have certain rights and also obligations to that following generation. If this sounds too complex, I want to show you how kids might respond.
Hi, Jesse.
Hi, Grover.
How you?
Fine.
Good. I have a question for you.
What is it?
Well, you know what marriage is?
A marriage is when two people get married.
Yeah, that's good. That's marriage. What else is it when they get married? Then what do they do when they're married?
Kiss.
They kiss, yes. What else when they're married?
Hug.
Hug, that's good. That's good. Anything else?
Nope.
That's it?
Yep.
Well, they live together. They help each other, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Yeah. Because they see each other every day.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's important to help each other.
Yeah.
Are they friends also?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, it's a lot in the marriage, isn't it? Kissing, hugging,
Yep.
friends, helping, all that stuff. Yeah. Well, I guess that's what marriage is about.
Yep.
Thank you for your help.
You're welcome.
Anyways, I think that kid's ready for the university. All right, so let's start exploring different types of marriages around the world. I don't know how familiar are you with different cultures of Africa, but the Nile River that goes the river that goes all the way to Egypt and then discharges in the Mediterranean Sea. In the upper banks of the Nile River, you have the Nuer and the Dinka and other groups that are mostly cattle ranchers. That's what has distinguished their culture for years on end to this day. Although things are changing and are complicated because they are for the most part living in Sudan, and you probably remember Sudan just broke into two different countries. So anyways, but we can still talk about some of the traditions of marriage among the Nuer, just to start showing you how different can it be and the reasons why marriage can be so different in different parts of the world. So the Nuer are part of the Nilotic folks in Africa. It's just think of these really tall and slender people that are usually working with cattle. So for the Nuer, let me take you back. For the Nuer, the marriage comes with bride wealth, and I'm going to explain bride wealth and dowry as two different institutions that are used in marriage in different cultures. So bride wealth is the wealth that is presented by the husband to be as a token of compensation to the family of the girl that is going to be marrying, the woman that is going to be marrying this individual, because that family is going to be losing that woman and it needs to be compensated. Interestingly enough, when the husband dies, the Nuer maintain that that person continues being present in the form of a ghost. So the woman remains married. So what happens is that a clansman, a member of the family of the deceased, will take the place, but it will be remarrying in name of the person who has died. And so in that sense, the woman is not married to the living, but is married to the one who died, and continues to live with the kingsman. That way, in this society, the bride wealth that was given to the woman doesn't need to come back, and that provides stability to the group. Interestingly, right? So it's quite different to what we're used to. So I have a link there for a short clip if you want to see it. There are different types of relationships that you can see emerging in marriages around the world. So you have affinal relationships, which is connections that are generated through with marriage. But then within the family that it results from the marriage, you have consanguineal relationships, that is connections that are based on descent. Two individuals come together, and then the children will be part of this consanguineal network of relationships, right? Two concepts that you also need to be reminded of when we're talking about family and marriage will be endogamy, which is a marriage that happens within a close social group that is within a family. For example, cousins marrying cousins, or in some cases, as it was the famous case of the kings of Egypt, brothers and sisters, right? The idea is to keep the wealth within the family. And then exogamy. There is a marriage that happens outside a defined social group, and oftentimes exogamy is the preferred one, naturally preferred because it enriches the genetic pool of the group. Endogamy has a potential for consequences that exogamy limits, because that way, when you have, just let me say this, so when you have certain genes that if you have repeated across generations will result in illnesses and weaknesses of the group, you can resolve that by bringing a different pool that cancels out some of the negative issues with the gene pool that you have in certain groups. So that's why we outmarry as a preferred form of connecting with creating a new marriage. There are in terms of marriages, two types. So you have polygamy, which is more than a single partner for your marriage. So you have more than that. It can be many women to one man, or many men to one woman. And monogamy, which is the normative in Western societies, that is one man, one woman. Although we know that it's more complicated than that, and I'll get into that in a second. For polygamy, which is more than one partner, as I said, you have polygyny, which is more than one woman, Guinea, and polyandry, which is more than one man. So a woman marries andros, is men, more than one man.
Amar and Kundan are brothers. Now in their 40s, they have lived together almost their entire lives in the hills of Himachal Pradesh. They share just about everything: their work, their home, and a wife. Tell me about your wedding day. We have a simple wedding, Kundan says. There is a bride and a groom, and the younger brother is simply attached to the elder brother. And this is their wife, Indira Devi. The trio have worked side by side as husbands and wife for more than 25 years. It's been going on for ages. My sister-in-law has two husbands. My mother-in-law also has two husbands, she says. It's called fraternal polyandry, where the brothers of one family are all married to the same woman. It's not common in most of India, but still flourishes in remote parts of the Himalayas. There are about 200 families in this steep hillside village that function pretty much the same, although some wives have 3 or 4 husbands, depending on how many brothers there are. Typically, the marriages are arranged. What about love? Do you love both of these husbands equally, or was this just for tradition? I like both of them. I look at them the same. When I am troubled, I tell them to marry someone else. But they won't. What they do want is children with their shared wife. This is a bit embarrassing, but how do you deal with sex at night? That we have to work out. We make shifts, change shifts, and sleep on alternate days, or else it won't work. Is it difficult to have to share a wife between the two of you?
I'll think about
To
that.
run the families, we have to do this, overcome the hurdles, and we have to control our hearts from feeling too much also. But feelings grow, and so did their family. They have 3 adult children now, who all live and work together in the same house. Do you know which child belongs to which biological father? We tell the kids that both fathers are the same. The family doesn't know and doesn't care. The daily grind takes all their time and energy. There is no room for vehicles here, so everything is carried by head and hand. Life is simple. And most villagers do hard labor on their tiny plots of inherited land. Younger brother Amar breaks stones for a living in his backyard and at a mine. His wife does back-breaking work in the fields, careful not to step on snakes. In this difficult terrain with few jobs available and very little land to share, one of the reasons that polyandry is popular here is because of pure economics. The practice goes back centuries because land is so scarce in this hill country. If Amar and Kundan had taken separate wives, they might have had to split the family's little land. So they stick to tradition. Do you want this tradition to continue with your 3 children? I feel it is good for my daughter to have 2 husbands, she says. If they marry like that, they will be happy in the future. Her 17-year-old daughter isn't so sure about that. How many husbands would you like? 1, 2, or 3? Team. I would like 1 husband, she says. But in this remote corner of India, Sunita Pundir knows she is bound by custom. Will you marry for love or you will marry for tradition? I will marry for both, for tradition as well as for love. I will never leave our tradition, even if I have to forego love. I will never spoil my parents' reputation and my brother's. Sunita's 2 brothers have already decided they will follow tradition and share a wife.
Family marriage joint system.
My opinion is that in a family there should be a joint system, he says. The joint system is very good. Family runs very well that way. To find one, they'll have to travel to another village. The gene pool here is too small. The villagers say almost everyone here is related in some way. There's another incentive for polyandry. For every 1,000 boys born in this region, there are about 850 girls. As education and India's rapid modernization seep into this hill country, though, its ancient traditions may fade away. Until then, life for these villagers will be much the same as it was for their forefathers and mothers hundreds of years ago. Sarah Seidner, CNN, Himachal Pradesh, India.
That's a part of India that I would love to get to visit sooner than later. Okay, so interesting case, right? I don't know if you were familiar with this. So you can have not only polygyny, but also polyandry, which is many women to one man. So monogamy, it's this idea of being married to one spouse at a time, whereas polygamy is married to more than one spouse, male or female, at a time. And then for definitions, polygyny we will define as a man that may be married to more than one woman at a time. You can have what they call serial polygamy or polygyny when you have a man that marries multiple women over time, although technically it's at one time, not over time. And polyandry, the same as a woman that may be married to more than one man at a time, as in the case of the brothers in Nepal, in India. All right, what are the varieties of polyandry that are there in the planet? Again, you'll be surprised of the diversity of the families and marriages, types of marriages that are there in the planet. So you have the fraternal polyandry, which is exactly what we saw in the clip. It happens, you can find that in Nepal and Tibet, and the explanation is oftentimes based on the material base for those villages and those cultures. It is an elegant solution to a very serious problem of the transmission and maintenance of the property, so that the property remains as a viable unit. You cannot downsize by division the units of production that you have in Nepal and Tibet without risking the entire survivability of the village. So that's why these forms of marriage are sanctioned and accepted as an elegant solution to a problem of resources. In the absence of moral judgments, we see this again not as an aberration, as something that is totally strange and objectionable, but as an elegant adaptation to conditions. And we've done this over the time. Maybe if the conditions that are faced by communities and cultures in Nepal, if those were prevalent, then we will be used to that kind of marriage, and we will think of this nothing. It would be just the norm, and therefore not something that will be scandalized by or surprised by, as we probably are. The associated polyandry is not brothers marrying one woman, but a woman that marries different men that are not necessarily brothers. And then the secondary marriage, which is when someone takes, for example, in northern Nigeria and Cameroon, a woman marries more than one husband, what they call the secondary husbands, although the initial marriage is the one that counts. And anyways, that's a way to cope with different ratios of men versus women and different uses and customs with resources. Marriage has a lot always to do with management of resources, and that seems to be a cultural universal. All the cultures in the world have marriage bearing some importance and consequence with regards to resources, and that is not different from for us. Let's then go back to this idea of bride wealth and dowry. And I hope that you will remember the difference between bride wealth and dowry from now on. These are two concepts that we extensively use in anthropology. So bride wealth, that is the wealth that the bride brings to the marriage, is quite common in patrilineal societies. And that it's a way of transmitting the wealth of your one generation to the next one and to provide some maintenance, right? So it's most common in patrilineal societies that combine agriculture, pastoralism, and patrilocal marriage. Patrilocal means that the woman is going to move to live with the family of the bride, of the husband, the male husband, the husband, right? So that's patros, father, and local means place. So woman goes to the place of the husband. Whereas in matrilocal instances, then it is the husband that moves into the family of the bride. The bride wealth also, it's done in a symbolic way, ceremonial way, so that the transfers of important goods from the family of the groom to the family of the bride takes place in a formal way, and because that means there's going to be a commitment, right? So let's take a look at this following clip.